Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening, Milpitas. Welcome to tonight's special Milpitas City Council meeting here at 455 East Calaveras Boulevard in the land of cornfields. It is a special meeting on the second Tuesday of the month. Shout out to Milpitas Unified School District, also meeting same time. And we have a couple items here tonight. It'll be a really great meeting, another one. And so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we'll do what we usually do. We'll go to our city clerk, Wendy Wood, for the roll call.
Councilmember Chua,
Here.
Councilmember Dominguez,
Present.
Councilmember Fan, Vice Mayor Montano,
Here.
Mayor Tran.
Here. Thank you very much, Wendy. And we do have a closed session item tonight. And before we go to closed session, let's check in with our city attorney, Michael Matalapasi.
Yeah, so we're going for a closed session on anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.92. This is potential litigation. The city is a defendant related to resolution number 9171.
Thank you very much. And we'll be back, folks. And we're back from closed session. It's great to be back here in City Hall. A joy and honor and a pleasure to be a public servant here in Milpitas. And so I want to thank all our community members for their support. Thank you so much. We just got out of closed session and we'll go to our city attorney for any announcements.
Yes, thank you. The matter was discussed in closed session. Direction was given to council and the matter shall come before the council in open session on the 21st.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody, if you may, please stand. Again, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now we'll go to presentations. It looks like we have one here, or is that? That's not it. Okay. Actually, no presentations tonight, perhaps next week at our regular meeting. And now we're moving on to the public forum. If any members here today present would like to speak, tonight's comments will be limited to 1 minute. Anybody in the chamber that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none. We'll go to the Zoom for the public forum. If you're joining us on Zoom, folks, but you may be here for a specific particular agenda item, it would, I think, be better for you to speak during that item when it's heard and discussed. But I'll never stop you. If you have any comments here on the Zoom, raise your virtual hand. If not, it's okay. Maybe we'll have another opportunity later. Okay, that's it for the public forum. Moving on to the announcements. We'll go to our city manager, Steve McHarris.
Thank you, Mayor Tran. I have no announcements for the special meeting.
Thank you very much. And then for me, I do have an announcement for city staff, perhaps our city manager, for the month of August. I think Indian Independence flag raising. I think there's an event. I'd like to have the flag raising agendized for the council to deliberate on.
Yeah, so I believe the request will be to add the flag raising event to the resolution for flag raisings of the city council. We'll bring that to the next council
Great,
meeting
yeah,
next week.
yeah, that's it.
We'll put that on consent for you.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. You know, let me have the list on my phone here. Let me bust out my phone, folks. Let me go to my notes. I believe we also have some scouts that are looking to do their Eagle Scout ceremony here at City Hall. So if I can note that to the city manager as well, and we'll work on supporting our Eagle Scout ceremony. Yeah. See here. Okay, I think that's good. Thank you. All right, next up we have Councilmember Dominguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor. At this time, I would like to ask for the council consideration to help support Chris and the Lorenzana family. This family is a family that uses our skate park, and unfortunately, their family is being faced with some cancer challenges. There is going to be a fundraiser, and I would like to ask staff to waive the fees and to work with this group that is going to would like to do a fundraiser in regards to help this family out on August 28th at the Milpitas Skate Park. I know that sometimes we have fees, and I would like to kindly ask this council if we could please waive the fees and work with them so they could have the event at the Milpitas Skate Park. As you know, this is a special place for those that skate there, and I hope that this council supports this family that's going through a really hard time, and who the community is rallying together to really bring some funds against cancer. Thank you very much for your kind time and for your consideration.
Yes, Councilmember Dominguez, for the record, what we'll do, if you're good with this, is connect them with a nonprofit to qualify for the fee waiver, and we can work on that. And if you can pass us the information, because we can connect with the family.
Absolutely. And then I know that there might be restrictions on the skate park. I also want to just make sure that the staff works with them. It's just the skate park is a very special place, so just making sure that they could have the event closest to the skate park. That would be greatly appreciated as well. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor, for your consideration and council. That concludes my remarks.
Any further requests, folks? Anybody else? Announcements? Or, yeah. I see none. Looking forward to this week. We got a lot of events happening. Did someone say Chick-fil-A? Nah, we'll be out there. Yes, looking forward to it. Looking forward to Chick-fil-A. With their grand opening, I believe open to the public, starting Thursday or Saturday. Already a lot of interest by our public over there. I was over there recently, but yeah, we got a lot of events and looking forward to seeing folks out in the community. Next up is the announcement of conflict of interest and campaign contributions. Michael. Oh, wait a minute here. We got Councilmember Chua. Let me just pause there, pause everything. Councilmember Chua, did you? Oh, okay. Right, you're getting ready, huh? Yeah, thank you. All right. Our city attorney.
I ask the mayor and each council member whether he or she has any financial or personal conflict of interest related to any item on tonight's agenda.
None.
Councilmember Chua, that's a none. Councilmember Dominguez.
None.
Councilmember Fan.
None.
Vice Mayor Montano.
None.
And myself is a none.
And Mayor Tran and members of the Milpitas City Council, please disclose any campaign contributions of $100 or more received within the last 12 months from any of the parties entering into contracts with the city on tonight's agenda, or contributions received from development project applicant for development projects on tonight's agenda.
Councilmember Chua.
None.
Councilmember Dominguez.
None.
Okay, Councilmember Fan.
None.
Vice Mayor Montano.
None.
And myself is none.
Let the record reflect no reported conflicts.
Thank you very much. Next up's the reading of the City Council Code of Conduct. I'll go ahead. Let's be respectful and courteous, model civility, avoid surprises, praise publicly and criticize privately. Focus on the issue, not the person. Refrain from using electronic devices while on the council dais. Doing my best. Disclose conflicts of interest and affiliations related to agenda items. Yes, we did. Thank you. Separate governing from campaigning. The council speaks with one voice after making policy on issues. Respect the line between policy and administration. Council will hold one another accountable to comply with this code of conduct. And we'll keep going here too. The approval of agenda. I'll move to approve the agenda. I need a second. We have a second from Councilmember Dominguez. Roll call vote. Councilmember Chua.
Aye.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Fan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Montano.
Yes.
Myself is an aye. The agenda is approved. Moving on to consent calendar. I like to put item number 3 and 4 on the consent. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Still haven't had that perfect meeting where it's just one sweep, but nothing for the consent from me. I'll move to approve the consent calendar as stated on the agenda. Need a second. We got a second from Councilmember Chua. We'll go to the roll call vote. Councilmember Chua once again.
Aye.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Fan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Montano.
Yes.
Myself is an aye, and that's it for the consent calendar. Looking forward to items 3 and 4 now. And before we jump into it, I just want to give a hearty shout out to our city staff for their incredible work throughout this fiscal year. I know we got another meeting next week before we sort of conclude the fiscal year city council meetings, but knock on wood, I don't want to jinx anything. It's been quite a pleasant fiscal year compared to years past. And then, obviously with COVID and, all the issues that came along with it. So it's just been a really good time. I just want to thank city staff, department directors, chiefs, support staff, Just really, really blessed. And tonight we get to go over a couple of really nice items. Item number 3, receive a presentation and provide direction to staff on a proposed zoning ordinance amendment, amending sections of Chapter 10, Title 11 of the Milpitas Municipal Code relating to maximum building heights. Okay. Disregard. Thank you very much, Steve. See, for some reason, I thought number 2 was on consent. It was the page break. Yeah, okay. Let me rewind, folks. My apologies. Public hearing, item number 2. Conduct a public hearing to approve the fiscal year 22-25 consolidated plan, fiscal year 22-23 community development block grant funding allocations, and corresponding annual action plan, and a substantial amendment to the fiscal year 19-20 annual action plan. And we'll go to our Director of Building Safety and Housing, the amazing Sharon Goey.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I guess sort of good afternoon, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and members of the community. As you know, our team has been working on Cdbg for several months. On April 5th, the City Council held the first public hearing. So today is our second public hearing. Next slide, please. For some quick background, Cdbg is administered by the Department of Housing and Urban Development of the federal government. All Cdbg funded activities must meet a national objective. The City of Milpitas has been using Cdbg funding to benefit low and moderate income persons. At the April 5th council meeting, City Council conducted the first public hearing to discuss the fiscal year 22-25 consolidated plan goals and priorities, and to provide staff direction for the fiscal year 22-23 allocation and the corresponding annual action plan. Subsequently, HUD released Cdbg formula allocation on May 13th. The amount for Milpitas is $660,871. As expected, there's no additional COVID-19 related funding that was allocated. Next slide. So Council saw this overview on April 5th of staff's outreach to the community and a timeline of activities. What I have added here are the last 2 bullet points where HUD announced the formula allocation in May and tonight's second public hearing that's being conducted by City Council. Next slide. Here's a quick recap of the fiscal year 22-25 consolidated plan. The consolidated plan is a document that's derived from public input. This document demonstrates the jurisdiction's plan to allocate Cdbg funding to benefit low and moderate income individuals. The consolidated plan process serves as the framework for a community-wide dialogue to identify housing and community development priority needs and goals. The consolidated plan is basically a strategic plan that carries out our community development goals and provides a basis for the yearly annual action plan in assessing our performance. Sometime in the past, the City of Milpitas and the rest of the county adopted a different consolidated plan schedule. So by doing a 3-year consolidated plan, this will allow the city to align with the rest of the county. And this is important because it's going to help us ensure that we can leverage the regional resources that typically go into developing a consolidated plan. As part of the proposed consolidated plan, we also have the first year annual action plan. So that's the 22-23 is the first year of the 3 Cdbg years. And these documents will be submitted concurrently to HUD. At the April 5th public hearing, Council gave direction to proceed with staff recommendations for consolidating goals and priorities. So when we get to the recommendation slide later on, you will see that one of the recommendations is asking Council to adopt the fiscal year 22-25 consolidated plan. Next slide. So now we'll take a look at the fiscal year 22-23 allocation and the corresponding annual action plan. This slide just quickly shows a review of the Cdbg application process. Staff held the application period open from January 3rd through February 18th. 23 applications were received, and one application was later withdrawn. So the result was 22 applications with a request totaling over 1.5 million. We received applications from 19 different organizations, which is a new record, and this just demonstrates the extensive outreach that we conducted across community organizations. And as noted at the April 5th public hearing, the amount of funding that applicants requested is significantly more than the amount of funding available. Next slide. So how much funding is available? As we noted earlier, on May 13th, HUD announced a fiscal year 22-23 formula allocation of $660,871 to the city. And so based on this amount, HUD allows a maximum of 15% for public services, 65% for capital projects, and 20% for program administration. So you see the numbers there on the screen in the first row. In order to allocate these formula funds, staff will submit a new annual action plan. For unused Cdbg coronavirus funding, there is $43,506 available. In accordance with HUD guidance, these additional funds should be reallocated towards COVID-related activities. In order to reallocate this $43,506, the city is required to submit a substantial amendment to the fiscal year 1920 annual action plan. There's also unused fiscal year 2020 to 2021 formula fund, and this amount is $41,449.55. HUD's guidance is that these additional funds should be reallocated towards COVID-related activities. In order to reallocate this funding, staff will submit a minor amendment to the fiscal year 20 to 21 annual action plan. So you can see the total funding available is $745,826.55, as opposed to the over 1.5 million in funding request. So we have significantly more requests than funding available. Next slide. At the April 5th public hearing, Council asked staff to review which organizations will receive the city's American Rescue Plan Act funding. After the Recreation and Community Service Department conducted the RP process, we met with them and learned that of the organizations that applied for ARPA funding to provide social services, only one organization, Child Advocates, is also a Cdbg applicant. However, Child Advocates applied for ARPA funding to provide support for LGBTQA+ foster youth. This is not a duplication of the court-appointed Special Advocates Program for which Child Advocates has applied for Cdbg funding. And late afternoon today, I learned from Renee that Child Advocates withdrew from the ARPA nonprofit group, so there is no duplication. At the April 5th council meeting, Council also provided direction to fund established nonprofits and to find a way to subgroup the requests. Next slide. Here are a few more considerations for the proposed Cdbg allocation. For SVLC's $300,000 rent relief funding request, since the city received a grant award of $95,927 from the Santa Clara County Emergency Food and Shelter Program for rent relief, and the city allocated this grant to SVLC as the city's fiscal administrator, there is an alternate funding source. Furthermore, the council allocated $1.1 million of ARPA funding for rent and mortgage relief. Therefore, no Cdbg funding is proposed for rent relief. On the next several slides, we'll be looking at proposed Cdbg allocation. Per City Council direction from April 5th, all existing Cdbg applicants have been funded. The amount of proposed allocation was determined also based on council priorities, the proposed goals of the projects, and the applicant's history within the Cdbg program. Next slide. To cover formula funding for public services, we have 3 slides for you. So this is the first one. And this slide is showing the nonprofits that the city has partnered with in prior years. I'll pause for a bit so you can take a look. The proposed allocation amounts here are similar to prior years. Next slide, please. Now, this second slide on public services is where we group senior food assistance, so you can see all of them on the same slide. They are also nonprofits the city has funded before. For the Milpitas Senior Center Nutrition Program, in coordination with Recreation and Finance Department, staff is proposing to use $11,900 of Cdbg funding and to evaluate at mid-year the budget needs for the remainder of the fiscal year. For Terrace Gardens meal delivery, staff is not diminishing the request, but the closure of the dining room is no longer a county mandate. While the proposed allocation for this application is lower than requested, several slides later, you'll see that a full allocation for Terrace Gardens capital project is proposed. Next slide. This is the third slide on public services. In line with April 5th council direction, the 2 new applicants are not funded. And for rent relief, as explained earlier, we have alternate funding sources, so no Cdbg funding is proposed. The proposed allocations from these 3 slides you've seen, they total $99,130.65. This is the 15% cap for public services. Next slide. Okay, now this slide shows the proposed Cdbg allocation for the Cdbg coronavirus unused funding of $43,506. As noted earlier, these additional funds should be reallocated towards COVID-related activities according to HUD guidance. For Procnia, staff proposed a lower amount because they don't have 1 year of Cdbg experience yet, and it will take time to demonstrate that they can manage a large Cdbg balance and meet the stringent reporting requirements. Domestic violence services have been a priority for the City Council in recent years, so that remains an emphasis in the proposed allocation for YWCA domestic violence services. Next slide. This slide shows the proposed allocation for the unused 2020 to 21 formula funding, and this amount is $41,449.55. HUD's guidance is also that these additional funds should be reallocated towards COVID-related activities. As domestic violence services have been a priority for the council, the proposed allocation for next door solutions continues that emphasis for the community. And staff did not propose Cdbg allocation for Milpitas Unified School District because school district receives funding from the state and various other sources. Next slide. This slide shows the proposed allocation for formula funding capital projects. For Life Moves, Council has provided a range of funding amounts in the past, so staff proposed a figure that seems more in line with funding approved in recent years. For Terrace Gardens, the proposed allocation is the full amount for their capital project. For Rebuilding Together, they serve Milpitas households directly, and they have demonstrated experience of managing a large allocation, so the proposed allocation was derived in that manner. And all of these funding allocations total $429,566.15. This is the 65% cap for capital projects. Next slide. Last but not least, this slide shows the proposed allocation for Formula Funding Program Administration. Project Sentinel has been serving as the city's fair housing provider that provides fair housing, tenant counseling, and dispute resolution services. The proposed allocation is in line with the current and prior year allocation. The 20% cap of formula funding for program administration gives us $132,174.20. So kind of back calculating, this gives us $75,884.20 for staff time in administering the Cdbg program, including public noticing and publishing. At the bottom of the slide is a sum of all the applications. The total amount requested, as we mentioned, is over 1.5 million, which is much more than the funding available. And the total amount being proposed to be allocated is $745,826.55. And that is the total funding available. Next slide. For a fiscal impact, as the city received this formula allocation of $660,871, the operating budget that was approved by council, adopted by council, reflects this amount. Next slide. So here are staff recommendations. Open the public hearing, hear testimony, then move to close the public hearing. Adopt the fiscal year 2022 to 25 consolidated plan. Adopt the fiscal year 2022 to 23 annual action plan with recommended allocation amount. Approve the substantial amendment to the fiscal year 2019 to 20 annual action plan. Authorize the city manager or designee to make any necessary changes to the approved fiscal year 2022 to 25 consolidated plan, fiscal year 2022 to 23 annual action plan, and fiscal year 2019 to 20 annual action plan as needed to comply with Cdbg submission guidelines. Authorize the city manager or designee to execute Cdbg agreements with the approved subrecipients and amend the Cdbg agreements as needed to comply with Cdbg guidelines. That concludes the presentation. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our Director of Building, Safety and Housing, Sharon Goey. And I'll go ahead and make a motion to open up the public hearing. Need a second. We got a second from Councilmember Chua to open up the public hearing for this agenda item number 2. We'll go to the vote. Councilmember Chua. Councilmember Dominguez. Councilmember Fan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Montano.
Aye.
Myself as an aye. The public hearing is now open. 1 minute tonight. Any public comments for Cdbg? Typically, we do have a lot of public comments. And so here we go. I see no requests from the chamber at City Hall. We'll go to Zoom. Put your hands up. Now's a good time. First up, Lindsay Mansfield on the Zoom.
Good evening, council members. My name is Lindsay Mansfield, and I'm the Director of Support Services at YWCA Golden Gate Silicon Valley. Just wanted to thank you so much for your continued support of our services to survivors of domestic violence. We couldn't do this without community, and we consider Milpitas part of our community, and we thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Teresa Johnson. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening, and we want to thank you for your past support and our continued partnership. As I think I've mentioned in the past, we've tripled our services in our county for meal services for seniors since the start of the pandemic. And we anticipate serving 320,000 meals this year. And we've set a goal to increase that by 10% next year to 350,000 meals. Your support will help us. We anticipate serving about 12,000 meals in Milpitas next year. And your support will help us assist in the funding for about 2,000 of those meals. As you know, we provide more than a meal. We do wellness checks. We provide birthday gifts. We have a senior socialization program. And we're very happy to partner with you again this year. And we thank you again for your support on behalf of the Health Trust.
Thank you. Next up, we have Georgia.
Good evening, council members. Georgia Basile, Directing Attorney of Senior Adults Legal Assistance. As you know, we provide free legal services to Milpitas residents, 62 or older. We are a current grantee receiving $12,000, and we thank you very much. We've been providing our services remotely during COVID, but we hope to reinstate them at the senior center very soon. We requested $12,600 in Cdbg funding, but the funding recommended in the action plan is only $7,000, a 44% reduction in our funding for next year. We can't charge fees for services or accept fee generating cases, so we're grateful for any amount that we receive from Milpitas. That said, with a 44% reduction in funding, our level of services and the goals in the action plan will need to be reduced proportionately, and we ask that this be reflected in the hearing record and in the action plan. So thank you again for your support.
What's your organization, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Senior Adults Legal Assistance, SALA.
Thank you very much.
I apologize for that.
No worries. I think you had mentioned it. I just wanted to ask one more time. Okay, next up we have Elena.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members, and thank you for this opportunity to share on behalf of the life-changing work that Rebuilding Together provides to the city of Milpitas residents. My name is Elena Schroede. I'm the Development Director at Rebuilding Together Silicon Valley. As many of you know, Rebuilding Together has transformed the lives of our clients and their communities by providing critical home repairs which help to preserve affordable housing and homeownership and to restore safe living environments for well over 30 years. Over the past 2 years specifically, we have overcome many new challenges in safely completing our repair work in the community, including inflation, causing our direct costs to increase by over a quarter. We've seen a 26% increase in the cost of roof repairs, hot water heaters, and furnaces alone. We're simultaneously seeing clients' needs increase dramatically. The types of repairs are becoming greater and greater. Therefore, the need for funding also continues to grow. And our team is working to overcome these cost increases as best we can and provide the necessary repairs for our Milpitas residents in need of support. We greatly thank you for your continued support of our critical repairs.
Thank you. Thank you. That is your time. And next up, we have Mira Chandra.
Hi, my name is Mira Chandra. I am the grants manager at Child Advocates of Silicon Valley. We would like to first thank the city of Milpitas for awarding us Cdbg funding over the past few years since fiscal year 2017. Funding benefits foster youth by being used to recruit, train, and support CASA volunteers to be assigned to foster children in Milpitas. Last year, this benefited specifically 10 foster youth and helped us recruit 15 new CASA volunteers. As you know, Child Advocates' mission is to be there for every foster child in Santa Clara County who has experienced abuse, neglect, and/or abandonment. We accomplish this by operating the court-appointed Special Advocates CASA program in Santa Clara County, specifically Milpitas. CASAs are trained community volunteers who are appointed by a judge's order to advocate for the best interests of foster children. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Marina Sanchez.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Great. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support to Terrace Gardens throughout the years. We could not do this without the support of the city. I appreciate the recommendation of the full funding of our trellis project. For our dining room project, we had requested $42,000 and we are being recommended for $11,000. We would have to open up our dining room. It's really for our residents' safety that we keep it closed because of the increasing numbers of COVID. It would be great if we could have that reconsidered for full funding, but I appreciate all of your continued support.
Thank you. And next up, we have Gloria Baxter.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mayor and council members, for your support of the counseling and psychological services we're providing to Milpitas residents. We are, from our reach out to the Milpitas community, we have increased those Milpitas residents who are receiving psychological counseling services, and it is very effective. So I thank you so much for providing the funds. This allows us to give each person who applies for funds 5 free sessions that they don't have to pay for. And then they can add that to the insurance. And if they don't have insurance, then we will give them 5 more sessions if they are needed. So thank you very much. We do appreciate your support.
Thank you. Next up, we have Linda Phillips.
Good evening, Mayor Tran and City Council members. My name is Linda Phillips, and I am the Director of Community Development at SourceWise. As you know, SourceWise is a nonprofit organization and the Area Agency on Aging, providing supportive services to older adults, their caregivers, and persons with disabilities in Santa Clara County for the past 49 years. We thank the Council for choosing to partner with SourceWise once again this year to provide Meals on Wheels to homebound seniors age 60 and older who are impacted by COVID-19 or who are unable to shop or cook due to illness or disability. The program provides 14 nutritious home delivered meals each week at no cost. We also provide weekly wellness calls through ambassador volunteers. We want to acknowledge that the proposed decrease in funding of less than 50% or $15,000 will be challenging. However, we plan to adjust services accordingly. SourceWise remains committed to continuing to provide home delivered meals to 60 seniors registered this year, and we will continue to enroll seniors in need into our program next year. Again, we thank you for your partnership and continued support of vulnerable seniors in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very well. Next up, we have Anna Lisa Navarro.
Good evening, everybody. This is Lisa Navarro from the Filipino American Chamber of Commerce of Silicon Valley. I am currently the vice president. FACC was established in 1982 as a nonprofit 501c, nonpartisan, non-sectarian, and mutual benefit corporation. It promotes and assists Filipino American businesses as well as general small business community in and around Santa Clara County. We would like to thank you for your support so that we could continue to work with the small businesses in the city of Milpitas to assist them in updating and rolling out new technology and updates to allow these small businesses whose owners and employees are in the lower income group to give them more visibility online as a way to pivot their businesses and aid in their business recovery from COVID impact. We have also assisted a couple of new businesses to be registered in the city. We would like to continue our efforts to guide our current clients and extend the technology and marketing assistance to the general small business community.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Appreciate everybody joining us virtually on this hybrid city council meeting. And we're thankful for all of your efforts in the community as nonprofits, truly impacting and changing lives in our community. Any further virtual raised hands for item number 2? Very well. Thank you for all the comments. I'll go ahead and move to close the public hearing. Need a second. We have a second from Councilmember Chua. Let's go to the vote. Councilmember Chua.
Aye.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Fan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Montano.
Aye.
Myself is an aye. The public hearing is now closed. Thank you very much. We will now go to so wait a minute. There's a member that put their virtual raised hand up, but the public hearing has concluded. Okay, the hand's gone. I'm sorry. Okay, that was the window of opportunity. All right, we'll bring the discussion up here to the council. I am ready to approve the item as recommended by city staff. Let's hear from my colleagues. Perhaps there's some comments. And first up, we have the Vice Mayor, Carmen Montano.
Thank you, Mayor. So this question is for Sharon. Sharon, we're doing well this evening. One question, can CDBG funds be carried over from the previous fund?
Are you asking if we don't allocate everything this year?
If there's anything that can be carried, for example, the COVID, I think you had some unused funds. Can that be carried over?
The direction we got from HUD is to reallocate those in accordance to, I think I had it on one of the slides.
Yeah.
For
So,
COVID related activities, yeah.
so, and can you give me an example of some of those related activities?
Yes. So we can actually pull up on the slide if you like, on slide 12. The CDBG coronavirus unused funding, staff's proposing it for Senior Center, Technology, Procnia, YWCA Domestic Violence Services. And there's also unused funding on the next slide, that's from 2020 to 21, formula funding. And HUD also indicated to staff to reallocate those to COVID-related activities. So these are the activities and organizations you see: Next Door Solutions to Domestic Violence, YWCA, and Filipino American Chamber of Commerce, Silicon Valley.
Okay, great. Those are some really good service providers that will really benefit the community. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. So with that, no one else is speaking. I'd like to second your motion, Mayor.
Well, let's go to, just want to get the order here. Let's get all our questions in before we go to the motion. After the motion, the second, we can provide any further comment. But if anybody has any questions right now on the council, now would be a good time to ask those questions. If not, we'll go with the vice mayor. Was that a motion, Vice Mayor?
To approve the staff's recommendation for our 2022-25 consolidated plan.
We got a motion by the vice mayor to approve agenda item 2 as stated on the agenda with staff's recommendations, and we'll go to Councilmember Chua.
Second.
We have a second from Councilmember Chua. Now that we have a second, are there any comments before we go to the vote? Okay, we got a second from Councilmember Chua. We'll go to the vote. Councilmember Chua.
Aye.
Councilmember Dominguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Fan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Montano.
Aye.
And myself as an aye. The motion is carried. We took comments during the public hearing. Thank you, Director of Building Safety and Housing, Sharon Goey, and your team in that department, as well as city staff and members of the community. And once again, congratulations to our nonprofit partners in the community. Moving on, to item number 3, let's receive a presentation and provide direction to staff on a proposed zoning ordinance amendment, amending sections of Chapter 10, Title 11 of the Milpitas Municipal Code relating to maximum building heights. I've been looking forward to this one. And we'll go to our Director of Planning, Ned Thomas. Yes.
Good evening, Mayor Tran, members of the council. As always, pleasure to be with you again tonight. And we have another zoning ordinance amendment for your discussion tonight. And we will take your input and bring it back to you in August for first reading if you choose to move forward. The topic for tonight, as the mayor indicated, is limiting maximum building heights in certain areas of Milpitas to protect views of the hillsides east of the city. And this issue was raised by members of the community in the wake of the proposed La Quinta Hotel project on Jacqueline Road back in early 2020. And at that time, following that, soon after, the council directed staff to explore options for limiting maximum building heights in certain areas of the city. Tonight's item is focused on that eastern portion, and it does not include limiting building heights in the metro. That will be a separate discussion that we'll bring forward to you at a later time. Tonight's presentation outlines work completed by staff with our zoning consultant, Holly Pearson, over the past few months, again, to develop recommendations for amending portions of the zoning ordinance, again, to limit the maximum building heights. We, again, have tried to keep them simple and straightforward. We have in the back of our mind that over the next year to 18 months, we will bring forward a comprehensive update to the zoning ordinance, but this item was a priority for the council. So, and as well as a few others that we have waiting in the wings, but we are bringing it forward for you tonight for this discussion. So I will mention that the Planning Commission reviewed staff's recommendations last week at their meeting on June 8th, and they made additional recommendations based on community input at the meeting, as well as community input and discussions with staff as we were preparing for the Planning Commission meeting. So all of this is summarized in the staff report, and we have our senior planner Lillian Van Hoa here again tonight to present that staff report, and then we will welcome discussion and your additional direction on this item. So I'll turn the time over to Lillian. Oh, looks like well, there she is.
There we go.
Thank you, Lillian.
A little bit delayed. Thank you, Director Thomas. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and fellow staff. As mentioned, the item before you is a city-initiated zoning text amendment for non-residential building heights in certain areas of the city. Next slide, please. Based on the direction received from City Council, staff has prepared a draft zoning ordinance text amendment to address community concerns about maximum building heights in areas of the city. It would also allow limited approval of additional building height beyond the proposed by right maximum with approval of a conditional use permit, also known as a CUP. The proposed amendment also adds clear and objective criteria and findings for approval of a CUP to allow additional building height. Next slide, please. The proposed ordinance would amend the following sections of the Milpitas Municipal Code: Title 11, Chapter 10, Section 5, Subsection 3, Commercial Zone General Development Standards, and Subsection 4, Commercial Zone Special Development Standards, as well as Title 11, Chapter 10, Section 2, Subsection 3, Definitions, and Title 11, Chapter 10, Section 57, Subsection 4, Conditional Use Permits and Minor Conditional Use Permits. Next slide, please. So currently, the zoning ordinance does not specify a maximum building height in the general commercial C2 highway services HS or town center TC zoning districts. The proposed zoning text amendment would add a maximum building height of 35 feet or 3 stories for these zones, as well as add additional discretionary building height beyond the proposed maximum building height with approval of a conditional use permit. This limited flexibility will be needed for structures such as clock towers, hospitals, etc., and the proposed structures must meet these specific findings. Next slide, please. There is one exception or caveat to the proposed zoning text amendment. The general plan allows mixed-use developments with up to 40 dwelling units per acre in the town center. And so the state density bonus law and Milpitas Municipal Code section 10-54.15 allows housing projects that meet the minimum affordable housing requirements to utilize concessions and waivers from development standards. And maximum building height is a development standard that is eligible for a waiver under the state density bonus law. Next slide, please. The zoning text amendment will include more descriptive criteria for the Planning Commission to consider when allowing for increased building height. Those include whether the proposed building is located within 100 feet of a lower density R1 or R2 zoning district, the width of the right-of-way of the principal street, the proximity of the site to low or medium density residential zones, building setbacks in relation to proposed building height in excess of 3 stories or 35 feet, and upper story step backs. Next slide, please. The proposed findings for approval for increased building height are as follows. The design, location, size, and bulk of the proposed building is compatible with the existing and allowed future land uses in the vicinity. The building's design, provides an appropriate transition and scale to structures in adjacent residential districts. The building's design minimizes shadows on public sidewalks, public open spaces, and solar facilities on adjacent parcels through step backs at upper levels or other design elements. Next slide, please. The zoning text amendment also includes a deletion of an existing provision in the definition of floor area ratio, also known as FAR, that allows an increase in the maximum permitted FAR with approval of a conditional use permit. The purpose of this change is to avoid conflicts with the new provision for a discretionary increase in building height. Staff is currently working on a separate zoning text amendment to address a discretionary increase in FAR. Next slide, please. The introduction and the future introduction and adoption of the ordinance is not subject to review under the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15061B3, also known as the common sense exemption. And as a separate and independent basis, the project is exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15183, projects consistent with general plan, community plan, or zoning. Next slide, please. So to summarize the recent Planning Commission meeting on June 8th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on the draft zoning ordinance text amendments. Community members expressed concerns with potential height of buildings in areas where commercial zoning districts abut lower density residential neighborhoods. In response to community concerns, the Planning Commission recommended limiting the height of buildings located within 100 feet of a lower density residential district to 2 stories or 30 feet, which is consistent with the maximum permitted height of buildings in the city's single-family residential zoning districts. The Planning Commission also recommended that discretionary approval of additional building height with approval of a CUP should not be allowed within 100 feet of the boundary of an R1 or R2 residential zone. The Planning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend that the City Council adopt an ordinance amending sections Chapter 10 of Title 11 of the Milpitas Municipal Code relating to maximum building heights. Next slide, please. Staff would like the council to provide direction to staff on the proposed zoning ordinance amendment setting forth regulations related to maximum building heights in certain zoning districts. And some questions to help guide this evening's discussion are on the slide. So do you agree with limiting the height of buildings located within 100 feet of a lower density residential district to 2 stories or 30 feet? And do you agree that discretionary approval of additional building height with approval of a CUP should not be allowed within 100 feet of the boundary of a lower density R1 or R2 zone? Once we receive direction from council, staff will prepare this final zoning ordinance text amendment and bring that for first reading at a later meeting in August. This concludes staff's presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Lillian. Great job. Let's go to public comment. Any public comment here in the chamber? Seeing none. We'll go to the Zoom for any public comment. Folks, if you're here for this item, number 3, and you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, we do have a person here. A couple people. Fantastic. First up, we have Bill Corby. Hey, welcome, Bill.
Hi, welcome everybody to this session. We strongly support the last item that was listed on the PowerPoint slide. And we're very appreciative that the City Council is taking up this topic, and the Planning Commission has done such a good job in pulling all this together into a presentation. And it's a very good thing that we do this to keep our quality of life good in Milpitas, and we're supporting it strongly. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Linda Dominguez.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I
thank you for this opportunity to tell you about the long-term care program at Catholic Charities of Santa Clara County. Also would like to thank the city of Milpitas for their past continued support of the Ombudsman program. The Ombudsman Advocate is the most valuable citizens of the city, those who live in nursing homes, and are advocates for dignity rights in the nursing homes of disabled in those facilities. This is an unduplicated service in the city of Santa Clara. There is no other program that has a 24/7 access to residents and facilities. We partner with other agencies such as Silicon Valley Independent Living Center, SALA, Next Door Solution, the Police Department and the Sheriff's Department, Adult Protective Services, and licensing. In the city of Milpitas, we have—
Thank you so much. Appreciate you very much. Thank you. We heard you. Okay, next up we have Frank Bush.
Hello. I like the amendments that you're making to the building code, so that people have, sunlight where they are, and the building heights are tiered so that, you don't have a 5-story building, right next to, a single family dwelling. So I'd like to see the final document so we can see how that's being implemented. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up, we have John Dahl, actually. John Dahl. And we'll get your microphone unmuted there.
Apologies for that. Along with Frank and Bill as founding members of Milpitas Involved Citizens, I want to express my support for the zoning text amendments as they've been presented to you. And we appreciate that the department has clarified and refined the height standards in ways that we believe will preserve the beauty and character of the residential neighborhoods. So we look forward to reviewing the upcoming final draft that will be presented for adoption in August. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, John. Okay, I do see another virtual raised hand, but that person has spoken already. And so if you hear me, wherever you are using the Zoom, each person gets one opportunity, just like everybody else. Fantastic. That looks like all the public comment. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the Milpitas Involved Citizens on North Hillview. And I want to give a shout out to the organized residential neighborhood on the South Hillview as well. As we know, there's been a lot of development activity along that low density residential area. And so those folks have organized at a very high level, and they have not forgot about the La Quinta, and they have not forgot about things like Project Home Key, and they will be ready to organize as needed. I'm very happy to see this item come back. I want to thank the City Council's support for the item that I proposed. And when we take a look at, Measure JKL and protecting the hillside, I think this item is up there along with the measure that the residents voted on, 75% overwhelmingly want to protect the hillside. And so I think this item is actually up there almost with it, just below it, because although, this seems like a citywide building height item, it's really meant to protect what's before the hillside. This is not hillside zoning that this would apply to, because the hillside already has certain zoning, but this is a sort of an extension to protect our view of the hills for the folks that live on Hillview, interestingly enough. So I actually wanted to kind of carve out an eastern part of our city map for this proposed zoning ordinance. I didn't mean for it to be citywide. I think along South Main Street, south of Cedar and South Main Street, there's definitely single family zoning there in the Pines. And I think that there's going to be development on South Main Street. Did I say Milpitas Boulevard or South Main Street? And so I hope this proposed zoning ordinance doesn't impact the development down there on South Main Street. And so let me check in with Lillian or Ned, because this proposed ordinance says within 100 feet of like R1 zoning. Is this proposed ordinance going to impact the development, the higher density development on South Main?
Thank you, Mayor Tran. So as we looked at the goals and objectives of this zoning ordinance amendment as outlined by the City Council, we saw that we could accomplish that by making some minimal adjustments to certain commercial zoning districts in the city, namely, as Lillian presented, the C2 general commercial zone, town center zone, and the highway services zone. And those three zones encompass the areas or include the areas around the Jacqueline 680 interchange, where there's particular sensitivity around building heights and the views of the hillside. And interestingly, there's only a handful of highway service and C2 zones in the city. So, and those include places like the Great Mall and one other area currently at the south end of South Main Street, I believe. And then the highway services zone, there's a few smaller spaces around the Jacqueline 680 interchange, and then one large area on the northern part of Milpitas Boulevard. And that includes some of the trailer parks, so our trailer mobile home parks. So those will not necessarily be affected by this ordinance amendment because those areas are already developed. And for example, the mobile home parks would not develop with commercial buildings at this time or probably for a long time. So again, our primary concern was meeting the objectives of the council and protecting the hillsides in certain areas. So, and to directly answer your question, the properties owned by the city and adjacent on South Main Street, just east of the Pines neighborhood, are all zoned for residential development. So this zoning ordinance amendment would not affect those at this time.
Okay, great. Well, I think tonight I'm going to be really driven by our public as always, but tonight a little bit more special to see the families that are joining us virtually at least. And I know that these are the same community groups that met with the Planning Commission, and a lot was heard. And if this proposed zoning ordinance satisfies their desires, then I'm here to support the community. Next up, we have the Vice Mayor, Carmen Montano.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to Ned and his department, his staff for doing a great job. As you know, when was it? I think 6 months ago is when the Hillview neighborhood residents reached out to us and were concerned. And I really commend them for taking a proactive approach to thinking about the future, about that area right in front of 680, because they were, according to the previous zoning code, they were going by the FAR, the floor area ratio, but now we're changing that. So I'm really glad that we're going to be able to help them and that community. And I really commend them. They're like a model group that takes a proactive approach and thinks about the community. They think ahead. So thank you so much. I really, I'm appreciative of this to make Milpitas a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, a champion for our neighborhoods. Thank you. Really quick, I want to ask a question for our planning director, Ned Thomas. So I just want to throw out sort of an example here. If the La Quinta Hotel project applicant decided to apply again to try to take another swing at the same concept project, the La Quinta Hotel in that same location. Let's just say they decided to do it. With this proposed zoning ordinance, that would not allow for them to meet the zoning proposed here.
That is correct. The proposed zoning would limit any building in that area, and it's within 100 feet of a residential neighborhood there along North Hillview. So those buildings would be limited to 35 feet, a maximum height of 35 feet or 3 stories, and they could not go above that unless, well, in other areas they would not be allowed to do that because they're within, that's the proposed amendment from the Planning Commission, is that if it's in 100 feet of a residential neighborhood, they could not go above the 3 stories or 35 feet. It would be prohibited. Now, in other areas that are not within 100 feet of a residential neighborhood, they could, through the discretionary conditional use permit process, a development could ask for another 3 stories up to 70 feet, but that would not apply in that neighborhood because it's too close to a residential neighborhood. And then one other change is if they were to ask for the additional height, currently the zoning ordinance doesn't give very good direction as far as the findings that should be made. It's not clear. So we have put together 4 or 5 very objective, clear findings that would need to be made in order for the Planning Commission and or the council to approve a conditional use permit for additional height where it would be appropriate. And I would just add to that that's very different from our current zoning ordinance, because the reason that the La Quinta Hotel project was able to propose a much taller building is that our current zoning ordinance does not have a maximum building height in the highway services zone. It just, the ordinance actually says none. So you have 5 commercial districts. The C1 zone and the commercial office zone currently have a maximum of 35 feet. And so to make it consistent, we applied that same standard into the other 3 commercial zones, C2, general commercial, highway services, and town center. And so now we have a standard that we can apply, and then only in very specific limited circumstances could they go above that. And again, at present, our zoning ordinance, because it says none, the actual height of a proposed building could be it's dependent on the FAR, and that's why we removed that provision from the zoning ordinance. We will come back and address that in another amendment, but at present the FAR was set in the definitions section of the code, which really doesn't make any sense. It was in a very strange location, so we're going to remove that and we'll address that in a more appropriate way.
I like it. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Councilmember Fan.
Sure. I very much empathize with the mayor's concerns regarding how the policy would be citywide. I think where I may differ might be in the approach, but ultimately I do have strong reservations about this impacting the city throughout. If this was something that was limited to one region, for example, say the hills, that would be a different story. However, this does impact projects beyond that. It might not impact the projects, on Main Street as referenced earlier, but it certainly would have consequences affecting future projects and potential business interests. So ultimately, for me, fundamentally, I can't support it. I think that a lot of the time when businesses look towards municipalities to do business in, to invest in, they look at what kind of business environment, what kind of reputation the city has. And so if a city is adding on regulation after regulation, such as this, for example, that hinders that economic potential, that economic development potential. So that's why I fundamentally can't support this.
Next up, we have Councilmember Chua.
Thank you, Mayor Tran. I call on Ms. Banoit to please put up the slide on the three recommend. It's about the third one to the last one. Not that one. I think two more before this one. One more.
Oh, you just passed. It was the green one. Not that one. Yes, that one, I believe. Is that right, Councilmember Chua?
This were these the recommendations of the residents that were suggested at the last Planning Commission meeting? Because I like those. I watched the Planning Commission meeting, the last one, and there are some recommendations from the residents that were incorporated in this tonight's presentation. I saw it, but I can't remember where it was.
Slide 6, I believe is. So the very first bullet point, I believe, is what you're referring to.
I'm referring to having taller buildings in high density R1 areas, limiting it to 30 feet, something like that. And also, anyway, what I would like to say, I like those recommendations. I like the fact that your team, Ned's team, work with our residents and listen to their input and incorporated those to tonight's presentation. I also appreciate the Milpitas involved citizens, because they did their homework and they made recommendations that made sense. And I also commend the Planning Commission for listening to the staff and also to the residents. Overall, it's a team effort to have a good recommendations tonight in terms of the height limits. And I look forward to incorporating this to the comprehensive zoning ordinance, which will be coming up soon. So thank you. Thank you so much. Great job, everyone. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Great comments, Councilmember Chua. And next up here, we have Councilmember Dominguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for the time. First and foremost, I do want to thank our community and the engaged group. I know that we have been able to work together in a couple of times. And so
I'm sorry, they can't hear you. Microphone, please.
Could you hear me now? Could you hear me now?
I'm sorry, you have to speak into the microphone. I'm sorry.
Could you hear me now?
It's a little better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you who are watching us and definitely thank the engagement that has happened between staff and the community. I truly believe that when we work together, we meet in the middle. That is something that I absolutely encourage, and I am extremely thankful that it looks like that's what happened. And I did also watch the Planning Commission meeting, and I am very thankful that staff has been able to listen to this community. As many of you know, I am one that is very engaged and have robust conversations with our community members, and I appreciate that platform. Staff, could you please go to the recommendations, because I think that's where we need to move into giving some feedback for you to type. I don't believe it's a... I just want to make sure that I have the questions before me. Thank you so much. So I do agree with the city. I do believe that it should be citywide. And I do believe that there has been a robust conversation. And so I agree with the recommendations that are being placed and supported by the community. One of the things that I do appreciate the staff is just thinking about those areas that they have addressed, because I do know how important that is as well. And so I do believe that it's important to keep the residential areas, especially with some of these height limits, making sure that we are thinking ahead, but also making sure that we are cultivating a community where we're providing a quality of life for our families. And so I'm going to limit my comments short because I know I have spoken to many members in our community, including those on this call. So thank you so much for your engagement and your time and for being here. And thank you, staff, for making it happen like always. Thank you. That concludes my remarks, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. We'll go to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that this staff's recommendation to move this forward.
I'll go ahead and second that. Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. That's a motion from the Vice Mayor, a second from myself. I do want to take a moment to thank the council, whoever is in support of this. This is a proposal that I worked on very hard to move forward. It didn't always have the support it needed to move forward. I want to thank Councilmember Chua for being really the biggest supporter on this council for this item that I proposed.
Mr. Mayor,
sorry.
I'm not sure there's anything, any city business to be done. I think this was just to receive a report and provide staff direction.
Oh, okay. Well, you motioned it. Jeez. Let's see. All right. Well, thank you for that, City Attorney. Duly noted, and I always appreciate that because I can go off the path a little bit sometimes. But back to what I was saying. This didn't always, and we're not done yet. We're gonna bring this back, I think, after the recess. But I'm just thankful. Maybe I shouldn't thank people too much right now, but I'm thankful for it moving forward today. It's gaining a lot of support. It was 1 and 2, more votes, so forth. So thank you, city staff, for working on this, and I definitely support it moving forward as recommended by city staff. Thank you very much, Ned and Lillian. Okay, great. Moving on to item number 4, let's receive a presentation on the pilot street sweeping program and provide direction to staff. This will be our last item of the evening, and we have our Deputy Public Works Director, Elaine Marshall, and our Public Works Director, Tony Enda, as well. There he is.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Elaine Marshall, Deputy Public Works Director, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about the pilot street sweeping program. Can we pull up the slides, please? Great. Next slide. So I'll quickly go over kind of the overview of the presentation I have for you this evening. I'll go over background of the pilot program, pilot design and implementation, data collection and results, initial pilot costs, areas where we are seeking council feedback and direction, next steps as well, and our recommendation. So next slide, please. So just for the background of the pilot program and how it was initiated, the City Council approved the pilot as part of the fiscal year 1920 CIP budget. At that time, the council approved $400,000 to implement the pilot program. Over the course of the development and implementation of the pilot, we provided several presentations to various commissions as well as the Transportation Subcommittee. Some pre-pilot presentations included going to the Energy and Environmental Sustainability Commission in August of 2020, the Community Advisory Commission in September of 2020, and the Transportation Subcommittee in October of 2020. During pilot implementation, we provided a 3-month update to the Energy and Environmental Sustainability Commission in June of 2021, and then a 6-month programmatic update to the Transportation Subcommittee in October of 2021. And then in early 2020, we provided preliminary results in a presentation to the Energy and Environmental Sustainability Commission in April, and then to the Transportation Subcommittee in May of 2022. Next slide, please. So really the goal of the street sweeping pilot was to implement a program that would result in more efficient street sweeping by ensuring that the street sweeper would have unobstructed access to the curb, so that it could effectively sweep the curb and gutter of our streets, pick up litter and debris that remained, and reduce the likelihood that that litter and debris would flow down the storm drains and into our creeks and waterways. So we're trying to improve the community aesthetic visually on the streets, as well as reduce the impact of litter in our waterways. And then the other result is a more beautiful, cleaner Milpitas for all to enjoy. Next slide, please. This slide goes through the journey that we went on for this pilot. We started in mid 2020 with research where we benchmarked other agency programs, including Union City, Hayward, and San Jose. We spent time reviewing their program and information, developing a program and pilot that we thought would work in Milpitas. We gathered baseline data on affected areas and then landed on 4 pilot implementation areas. We then coordinated the installation of over 220 no parking signs in the pilot areas and conducted outreach in the form of postcards, door hangers, and website prior to pilot launch. We began the actual street sweeping pilot program in March of 2021. And started with the issuing of warning citations. During the first 6 to 7 months of the pilot, because we were still in the middle of the pandemic and felt that there was an increase in people who were still working from home, we didn't want to adversely burden those folks with parking citations. And so warning notices were issued from March through October of 2021. In November of 2021, we switched to the issuance of parking citations and started the parking citation phase. In February of 2022, at the end of that month, we ended the data collection component of the pilot, since that marked the 1-year mark of the pilot. We kept the signs out in the pilot areas and continued with the enforcement and pilot street sweeping schedule. Staff then began to analyze the data that was collected. We provided preliminary information and report to the Energy and Environmental Sustainability Commission, as well as the Transportation Subcommittee in May. And then we're here now with you tonight to provide the overview of the results and to receive additional council direction and feedback. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the 4 areas where the pilot parking enforced street sweeping was conducted. These areas were identified because they were included in the city's long-term trash load reduction program as areas that were impacted by trash, or Milpitas Sanitation identified these areas as areas that were regularly impacted by parked vehicles, and they noticed that the street sweeper was not able to access the curb in these areas. These 4 areas also represent different housing, from single family homes to areas that also have higher density multifamily homes in them. And so we were interested in seeing if the different neighborhoods and housing densities impacted our ability to move vehicles during street sweeping. Next slide, please. So this slide really kind of just goes through the difference between the regular city street sweeping program and the pilot program. In the regular street sweeping program that all areas get currently, the street sweeping in residential areas occurs twice a month, and in commercial areas, it occurs once every week. During the regular street sweeping program, both sides of the street are swept during the day, and street sweeping occurs between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. in residential areas. For the pilot program, where we installed no parking signs, we did limit the time frame to 2 hours. So street sweeping occurred between 10 a.m. and noon in these areas. And the street sweeping was done on alternate days. And so if an area was in a Friday street sweeping day on the 1st and 3rd of the month, the first Friday, one side would be swept and vehicles were able to park on the other side. And then on the 3rd Friday, it was swapped, so that there was a thorough street sweeping through the street at least once a month. And then in these pilot program areas, parking citations were issued for any parked vehicles during the 2-hour time frame designated for street sweeping. Next slide, please. So this slide goes into the data that was collected during our street sweeping program, and actually is super interesting. You can see on the far left is what we call our baseline data. This was the condition or the data that we collected prior to the beginning of the street sweeping program. And then as you move further to the right, it's just chronologically the months of implementation. So represented by the blue line, you can see that we were able to increase the average access to the curb from the beginning of February of 2021 through February of 2022. We saw a 27.91% increase in access to the curb. This is how open the curbs are during street sweeping. And then if you look at the orange bars, the correlation is that because we're increasing access to the curb, we're seeing a decrease in the amount of parked vehicles during street sweeping. During this time, we went from a high of 539 vehicles parked on the streets during street sweeping to a low of only 96 vehicles parked during street sweeping in February of 2022. So this was about an 82% reduction over the course of the pilot program. One of the also interesting notes during the implementation, as I mentioned earlier, from March through October, the community service officers were issuing warning notices. While we did see a significant reduction in parked vehicles resulting from the warning notices, we saw an additional increase once the community service officers began issuing actual parking citations. This is also consistent with neighborhood and community member feedback during the pilot. We did get feedback as our staff were out collecting data that residents were happy to move their vehicles, but also wanted to see that their neighbors move their vehicles as well. And so we were getting lots of questions of when are you going to start issuing parking citations, and really encourage the folks who were being stubborn to move their vehicles. And so we are happy to report that once the citation started, we did see additional improvements and movement of vehicles. Next slide, please. And so this slide shows the increase in the amount of debris that the street sweeper was able to pick up over the course of the pilot program. Initially, we had assumed as we were developing the pilot that the amount of debris would decrease over time. And in reality, we saw just the opposite. It turns out that whether it's natural debris like leaves or non-natural debris like litter, increasing access to the curb resulted in more of that material getting picked up, and that material and debris is being constantly generated over time. And so we're happy to say that not only were we able to improve the effectiveness of street sweeping, it also we were able to document that more litter and more debris is getting picked up as a result. Next slide, please. So what did the pilot program cost us? This slide summarizes the costs that were incurred over the course of the pilot. You can see that the largest cost for single category is production, fabrication, and installation of the no parking signs. That cost about $58,000. Outreach to the pilot areas is about $5,000. Street sweeping cost about $26,000. And then labor costs for our staff to research, implement the pilot, and do weekly data collection amounted to about $39,000 for a total of expenditures of about $128,000. In terms of potential revenue from such a program, our estimates are that during the 3 months that parking citations were issued, we would have generated about $15,296 in parking citation revenue. This is the parking citation fee minus the $3 processing fee that we pay to a third party to process and collect the parking citation revenue. And it also excludes state and other agency fees. So we had a net pilot cost of about $112,704. One thing I want to also point out with this pilot cost is because of the size and the limited scope of the pilot, the parking enforcement costs were not included. We did not capture the time and the cost for community service officers to conduct the parking enforcement during this pilot program. And I just also wanted to note that if we were to expand to a larger program, we would need to identify how much time and labor it would cost for parking enforcement. Next slide, please. So tonight we're here to share with you the results. I think you'll be excited to see and hear about how effective the program and the pilot has been, and get some feedback from council and direction on where we should go next. So we have a couple of questions for the council to consider, and they're shown on this slide here. The first one being, should the parking enforced street sweeping model be continued in the pilot areas? The second item would be, should the parking enforced street sweeping model expand to additional areas? And then if we were to expand to additional areas, what type of criteria should be used in order to add those areas to a parking enforced street sweeping model? Some of the criteria that we have identified and that staff would recommend based on our implementation and research and conversations with other communities include that any areas to be added show that they are at least 40%, show that those areas have at least 40% of the streets that are blocked by parked cars on street sweeping days. That the areas be identified in the city's long-term trash plan as being impacted by trash, that there's visible litter and debris on the streets, and we have a protocol for conducting an online visual trash assessment, and we're recommending that these areas to be considered for inclusion be at least moderately impacted by trash. We also suggest that at least 50% of the single family homes in the neighborhood show interest and support no parking signage and enforcement, and that a minimum of 1 curb mile is required for new neighborhoods to be added to the program. This just allows for operational efficiencies over time. And then any other criteria that council thinks that we should consider for including neighborhoods in this program. Next slide, please. So the next steps after tonight, based on council feedback and direction, staff will return in the fall with a recommended program design, cost and resource analysis for what that program would cost and how we could resource and staff the various components of the program, funding options, and an implementation timeline. We do want to note that the program has a one-time allocation of $572,000, which includes now $300,000 of ARPA funds. This could be used for the installation of signage and initial outreach to the neighborhoods if we were to expand the program. However, any programmatic expansion will require ongoing resources to fund staff in the police department for parking enforcement. Next slide, please. And so the recommendation before you tonight for this item is to receive the staff presentation on the pilot street sweeping program and provide direction to staff. That concludes my presentation. If we can return to slide 11. Yes, 2 slides before this. Thank you. And we're here tonight for any questions and then to take feedback and direction from you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our Deputy Director over at Public Works, Elaine Marshall. Fantastic presentation. So happy to see this item tonight. I want to next give kudos to the Vice Mayor, Carmen Montano. Her leadership with this item certainly has shown with the various performance metrics that have been presented its effectiveness. And so kudos to the Vice Mayor for her leadership on this item. Another one to add to the list. I am going to support the direction of the Vice Mayor with this item tonight. I think there's some opportunities in terms of funding. I saw on one slide, Milpitas sanitation labor costs. Perhaps I can give MSI a call to see if they can provide sort of a support there with the expenses. They've been open lately to supporting our city. And I know we'll be hearing from them soon before the council. So those are expenses that can be offset perhaps. Furthermore, I do think I did have a scheduled meeting with MSI recently. It's on my calendar somewhere, but they're kind of open to supporting our city. So I want to actually using my deep understanding of our city and, I guess current events and items and such, but I know Councilmember Evelyn Chua has sort of a curbside waste pickup item. Perhaps MSI can support us with the curbside waste pickup service at no cost. And that would, I think, satisfy or exceed Councilmember Chua's proposal there with that curbside waste pickup. And if we can get that for at no cost from MSI, then perhaps we can take that money that was allocated and add that to the street sweeping, which is related close enough to the efforts that we're discussing right now. So those are just some financial management strategies that I'd like to put forward to our council and city so that we can make this happen. Certainly, residents appreciate the street sweeping, and it's so beneficial in so many ways. We got to really protect our waste streams and water streams. Some of this waste, as we saw in the staff photos, go to the gutters, and I think that sort of flows out to the San Francisco Bay. And as a angler in my spare time, I want to do all I can to protect the largest estuary on the Western United States. So those are just some thoughts. Let's go to the proposer of this item, Vice Mayor Carmen Montano.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank staff. This is a really good project. And I'll tell you how this came about. So I have a sister that lives in Union City. And every time I go to her home, I say, wow, your streets look so clean. There's nothing, no debris. And so she showed me that the signage on the streets. And I said, you know what, we need something like this in Milpitas. So that's back in 2020 is when I proposed this. And, all good things, it takes time. It's 2020, now we're in 2022, but I am so thankful that the leadership, the city manager was able to get this implemented, and the city council, with the city council's blessing. And I will tell you that I've gotten some feedback from the neighbors and wherever the signage are, and they are very supportive of this. They love it because it keeps their streets clean. It forces people to move their car when they're parked there for a long time. And I also appreciate staff going out to the commissions, asking their feedback, the CAC, the Energy, Environmental Sustainability Commission. And this has come to this Transportation Subcommittee as well. So thank you so much, because this has a multiplier effect. It keeps our city clean. It helps the residents, and it also keeps our bay clean. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. And next we'll go to Councilmember Evelyn Chua.
Thank you, Mayor Tran. On the cost, I have the same question as well, Deputy Director Marshall. I care about 300,000 from the ARPA specifically for this pilot project, because I was so impressed when you guys presented it to the Energy Sustainability Commission. And the 272 came from the leftover of the original cost, allocation. Is that where it's from?
Yes, Councilmember Chua, it is. There was 272,000 left over from the initial in the initial CIP, and then the additional 300,000.
Really, the total cost is around 212 something, right? The total cost of the project of the pilot is around how much?
The total cost for the pilot is about it's $128,000 so far, and then if we were to offset that with the revenue coming from the citations, the revenue is about $15,000, and so the net cost would be $112,000 for our current estimated cost. But I do want to note that this does not include the parking enforcement costs, and so that's an ongoing cost that we need to determine how to staff and fund going forward.
I like the way.
And
yeah, go ahead.
And I just would note that the CIP costs are one-time costs, and so we could use that for any additional areas and additional signage and initial outreach. But we do still need to determine the best way to fund the ongoing costs.
Okay, my question is, I'm trying to get dollars as well as piggybacking on Mayor Tran. There is a Milpitas sanitation street sweeper labor of 26,000. Is that part of they do this anyway, right? Is that on top of the cost that we do on a regular basis, or is?
Yeah, great question, Councilmember Chua. This 26,000 is the estimated cost to conduct the street sweeping in this pilot limited area. And during the 2-hour window. And so Milpitas Sanitation had to use a different street sweeper and a different driver in order to service this area in the pilot area during this very specific window. Because otherwise the street sweeper has all day, and it's a little bit unreliable when they would come through. And so because this is a different street sweeper and an operator in a different vehicle, there was a cost above and beyond their regular street sweeping.
Don't we get something because they're not doing their regular sweeping? Can we reduce?
Well, that driver still had to, the regular street sweeper driver still had his other areas to work. And so there isn't a direct offset from that,
If I may,
operations.
I think it's the incremental service, correct? Of the incremental cost of the higher level service.
Yes.
Okay. The thing that I like about this when I first been exposed to it is you guys are so smart. You were able to reduce it in 2 hours. That is the key. That's why the cost went down. The original estimate of this is high, like the original allocation. Because you guys, your team are so smart, that you're able to reduce it to 112, which we have an excess amount of 272. So I'm going to go ahead and answer your questions, please, on that last slide. Should parking enforce street sweeping model to continue in the pilot areas? Yes. Should parking enforce street sweeping model to expand to additional areas? Yes. And I say yes to all this because this makes sense, because if we're gonna extend the pilot, it has to be within the original pilot streets. Make it easier, I think, convenient. And everything else, I agree. So thank you so much. This, like Vice Mayor said and Mayor Tran said, this is a great project. And actually the goal is to have this implemented throughout the city. And that I'm looking to your team to get a forecast or a plan on how to do that and the cost. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Tran.
You're welcome, as always, Councilmember Evelyn Chua. And so we'll continue to provide the staff direction. And next up, we have Vice Mayor Montano.
Thank you, Mayor. So for me personally, I would like to have this model expanded to additional areas. And I think it's a good thing for the whole city. So with that, I'd like to, this is not a motion, but I'd like to note, receipt, and file. Thank you.
And we'll continue. Next up, we have Councilmember Fan.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of sentiments made by my colleague, Councilmember Chua, especially the point on the hourly rates as opposed to the whole day. I certainly want to commend staff, for being strategic there. I do have a question in regards to the signage. That's a one-time cost, right?
Yes, Councilmember Fan, the fabrication and the installation of signage is a one-time cost. And we are required by state standards or for enforceability to install signs every 200 feet in a parking enforced area. And so that's how we got to 221 signs in the pilot areas.
Sure. And when we procure for the signage, that's not something we do in-house, right? That's something that we go through the competitive process?
Yes, in this case, we did outsource the fabrication of the signs and installation where we needed to install a new pole. In certain areas, you can see on one of the photos where there were multiple signs kind of already on a pole in a neighborhood. Our public works staff were able to install the sign there.
For the specifications for, like the material of these signs, are they any different from any other street signs that, we would often replace?
They meet the state standards for typical traffic signs. And so you'll notice these no parking signs all kind of look a certain way, and they're a certain size with lettering and text of a certain size.
Sure. Yeah, so the reason I bring all this up is it seems to me one of the largest costs incurred here is the signage, apart from the labor costs. And I understand that it's a one-time cost, but I wonder if it would make sense if there's a value proposition for us to establish the infrastructure to do our own signage, and that way we can replace signage whenever at a rate that is not comparable on the market, and it wouldn't be limited to just this program, there's a utility there for public works there. So
Yeah.
If that's something that's on the table to address cost here, I think it would go a long way.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly, Councilmember Fan, I think that's something we can look at once we have more definitive feedback from council on programmatic design, and it's one of the things we'll evaluate going forward. We do have in Public Works a sign shop, and we have city staff that repair, replace, and create signage throughout the city. Because of the limited nature of this pilot, they weren't able to absorb the fabrication and installation during the time frame we needed the pilot to be implemented, and so that will definitely be something we review going forward. Is if the signage can be done in-house, and we'll include that when we return to council in the fall with final or more information on cost and resources.
Sure. Yeah, I think wherever we can, produce cost savings, we should pursue. If we can partner with some of our business community members, MSI is potential, right? Maybe other vendors as well. But if that's a realistic opportunity, it's always a good thing when government works, in tandem with the business partners. And lastly, main thing for me, I would like for it to be cost recovery as much as possible. So, I don't know how you would go about that, but that would be a huge factor for me. Otherwise, I think it's a good program. I certainly want to commend my colleague, Vice Mayor Montano, for her leadership on this, and look forward to seeing, all of the possibilities with this program.
And next we have Councilmember Dominguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor. First and foremost, I'd like to commend Vice Mayor Montano for this great idea I am super excited to hopefully see expand in our entire city. I think that every block is deserving, especially if we are seeing a metric system that is working. And so I definitely echo the sentiments of the rest of the council members as well. So thank you, staff, for making it happen. And with that, I conclude my comments. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think that's all the feedback and direction tonight. Thank you so much, Deputy Director of our proud Public Works Department, Elaine Marshall. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council.
Yes, yes.
Have a good
And
night.
we're going to adjourn this meeting before. Actually, do we take public comment for number 4? We did. Okay. It went so well. I can't remember. We're going to adjourn this meeting before 8 p.m. tonight. Splendid. But before we do that, let's go to the Vice Mayor, Carmen Montano. And I know you have some things something to share as we adjourn. Please.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to have a moment of silence we used to have a fire chief, Johnny Crane, and he passed away yesterday. And I would like Chief Gerard, if he would like to say a few words on former chief.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, Brian Gerard, your fire chief. And sadly, I'm here to announce, as the Vice Mayor just said, we lost one of our former Milpitas firefighters, Johnny Lee Crane Jr., he's hired in 1974, retired in 1999 as a battalion chief. He was a very well-liked, very well-respected member of the fire department, and he will be sorely missed by those who knew him and loved him. And our condolences go out to his family and his friends, and the Milpitas Fire Department and City of Milpitas, mourn his passing.
Thank you so much, Chief Gerard, for those kind words. And if we could have a maybe a few moments of silence. Thank you so much.
This meeting is adjourned.